everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Let We Hear from Doc. I'm your host, Amanda Japal, and with me today is Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Claudius Mitchell. So, Dr. Mitchell, during one of those zonal meetings, one of those important zonal meetings, you made mention that you were going to resign as the political leader of the New National Party. And that was met with mixed emotions, confusion, anger, fear. I think even persons shouted out at that time, no, no, don't go. And then you made a statement. You said, but what about me? What about how I feel? Right? And I felt that. I felt that because oftentimes we think of our politicians as superheroes, energizer batteries, because you guys keep going and going and going, and you have been doing that for years, years upon years, way before I was even born. So I understand. And even if in our lives, my little life, I am often tired, right? So when you said that, it touched something in me because it showed your vulnerability. It showed the human side of you, right? So I want to ask you, how do you feel now at this stage in your life, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, but I'm not surprised. The good thing is I'm not surprised at the reaction. One must recall being around for all these years, there are some people who felt comfortable with me. And even those who felt like last election that it's time for change. And they understand also this change came with a lot of not necessarily the best results. So they themselves would be thinking, well, you know, hey, then they need to look at me again, so to speak. So I could understand the reaction of people, especially in a time when they were going through very harsh economic situation, and people feel vulnerable in every sense. And the fact that the government does not appear to show any sympathy or empathy, I should maybe a better word, as to where people are at. And of course, and doing anything that could make them feel there's a hope that this thing could change. The attitude towards people can change. And more you're hearing it said from the government side that they're very comfortable feeling that people are accepting their treatment of them, of the people, and making points that they have enough money to spread when election is on. And therefore they expect to win by just coming and share material things, which is to me insulting. It shows that this thing is not about people, it's about yourself. So it's when you're ready for me, then I have to need you. And then, but before that, forget you, and only about me. That's I think that's an understanding. So I could understand where people are at with respect to me and the decision that I made. And I don't like the word resign. I like the word retire from the political leadership at this time. And you have to, in everything in life, Amanda, and everyone has to understand there's a time limit set for everything. You can't be involved in something for eternity. There's going to be some shelf life with respect to anything. I used to be a very good cricketer. Can't be perform that role anymore. I had to understand years ago that the days for my competitive nature in cricket is gone. And like anything else, there are several aspects of my life at that time. So the political aspect came at the last round of some of the decisions that I had to make in several areas. And therefore, I believe that it was the right thing to do, to give another person the opportunity and be there also to provide support. What has happened in the past is some political leaders or persons in position of business, you know, you're in charge of the business, your children come around, but you don't want to give up. So the time when you have to give up is when you're sick and unable to function effectively. Then they would have lost the benefit of your experience. So don't wait until you physically or mentally not able to provide that support in a very serious way. Because the person is now the leader, but they still require our support. And the more experience the person has in a position of leadership in any area, the better they will perform in terms of their role in that particular position. So whether it's business, whether it's sports, whether it's politics, whether, no matter what it is, the persons that must understand in leadership, there will be a time that you have to move from that position and play a role, hopefully effectively so, in helping and advising and providing support to that individual. So I'm very comfortable with that decision. And I want people to be assured that I've said over and over, I'm not going anywhere. So why are you worried? Why are you concerned? Up to yesterday in some place I was, and somebody said, I'm not happy you're leaving. And I said, leaving where? And you see me now. Where am I going? So don't worry. But I think it will take time. And of course, our political leader now, Mrs. Spear, has a responsibility to demonstrate in this period that she's capable of handling this job and satisfying the people. And I believe that she will be able to, but they have to give her the opportunity. If you take a position that you cannot do it, then you're operating from a biased position, and therefore you're blocking yourself out from that possibility, that a high possibility that she's going to be able to give you what we gave you and more, because it's a new thing. And that so I'm very much at peace with that decision, and I call on everyone to understand that yes, that I have a life. I have given 40 years of my life and more to the politics of this country, and I will continue. As long as I have the breath of life, I would continue to do whatever I can to improve the lot of the people of this country. Because it's about service. It's not about position. A lot of people get jobs and get opportunities in certain position, and it's about themselves. They are the boss. They are the big boy. They are the high priest, so to speak. I never felt that way about the job of prime minister. No one could say that I behaved in a way that demonstrate to them that I was better than them in any position that I have, that I had. Even as a professor, going through my academic life, students always come into the classroom, and some of them they used to say, at one time I walk into a classroom, I never forget that, teach at Howard University, and I would sit on the students are talking because the first class of the period, and I went and sat down and just to listen. And I was a little late, and I heard people complaining. When I got up, and I said, they in shock because they saw me there just as an ordinary person. And I had to speak to them about life and the fact that I am your friend, not just a professor. I'm your friend, and that's why you should make myself available, that you should be able to challenge the things I say or do and seek advice as much as possible. And I'm prepared to listen to you. And I could be a better professor, a better teacher by the comments that you make and the message you send, that you have your own views about what you see, and that will help strengthen me going forward.
Of course, because every great leader must be a good listener. That's something we always mention. But you mentioned that you played cricket, and that's something that you've said continuously,
Yes.
right? And that being a prime minister came at a later date. What prompted you to become prime minister of Grenada, Carriacou, and PC Man?
Well, growing up, remember, I never saw myself as a politician. I never saw. Because of the environment in which I grew up in poverty in Brizan and Happy Hill, and so on. And most of the people there in Brizan were fishermen. and the ladies, the guys involved in the nets, and the ladies were like selling fish in the market or going around in the community selling, and my grandmother was that person, and so on. The men were in the garden or something like that, they were just farmers. And not farmers in the technical sense. Farmers are just planting things and hoping it grew, and so on. So you saw poverty at a deep level. So I was always completely sympathetic to the suffering that people were going through, in the sense that understanding that life should not be like that. And you felt that it should not be so. All of us are born with a gift God has given us, and therefore no one should feel that they're better than the next person. And the next person should feel that he has a chance to reach as far. And when I went to schools, I went to Presidential College, there was this class environment where you saw those of us who come from the country area, so to speak, or was poor and black, was seen as not as good as others, and you saw some people privileged and saw that they had opportunities and so on, and that sort of stuck with me, that that can't be fair, and that sort of environment brought that social consciousness on my part. So even when I went to university and so on, I saw an element of that same thing. So that sort of drew me more and more. But I was never involved in the politics of the university. Other Grenadians are in top position, president of the Guild of Undergraduates. In fact, the guys I went to school at the University of the West Indies, who knew me as very much as cricket, playing cricket in Barbados. As you know, Barbados was a highly cricket-oriented country. And they knew me as academically in mathematics as doing well within the university in the mathematics field. So they saw me as academic and cricket. They never saw me. So when I came back home and they heard that I was involved in the politics and emerging at that level, it was a big shock to them, and probably a shock to myself. So I think because of I followed Eric Gary's politics because in my community, Eric Gary was a hero because of his identification with the poor masses of people. And my parents were strong supporters of Gary. And I never forget. And one day, so Eric, now we call him Sir Eric, it was Gary at the time. He was passing through the village and he came home by my mother and father home. And I was eating. And those days you hardly had spoon. So he took a flex, if you know this coconut stuff. And he took and he bit one of the dumplings and so on, and put back the rest in. He gave me the rest. And I could never forget that. Because this was my hero. This man come along and eat a piece of my dumplings and identify with me at that level. I couldn't forget it. So after that, and no one mentioned Eric Gary in a question. You know, he couldn't do no wrong for me. So, in fact, at Presidential College, when I went to school, myself and another guy called Peter Klein, he's dead now, because his uncle was G.D. Klein, was in Gary's party. We are known as the only two Garyites then in the Form 5 Presidential College. I mean, maybe there are others, but they were not outspoken. We were the only well-known Garyites in Presidential College at the time. So that was that. All that upbringing, that identification, and through cricket and so on, and Gary got me every time. And I started playing cricket for Grenada at 16. Traveled to Dominica the first time in my life, and I was like the little boy, the schoolboy and the team and doing it. And I got picked for playing Windward Leeward. I was captain the Windward Leeward youth team, traveling all over the Caribbean and being captain and also being seen as a future prospect for possible West Indies. That's how people saw it. I didn't see myself there. All that gave me the sort of experience going through life, you know, and watching people at different levels. So my life story was one of opportunity to see people at different levels and so on. And I really saw this as maybe it's a gift. I don't know what it was. Cricket, academic, and the social consciousness that I developed over the years and so on. So my entry into politics was when I turned here in 1972, and I was by that time. While I loved Gary in terms of the social thing, and I saw some of the weaknesses on the political front, and I always tell him, I said, no, I admire you as a person, and I would never do anything to harm you as an individual, but I have difficulty with some of your political decisions. And he understood that. So despite the fact that I was against, did not support a lot of his political actions, he always never played a cricket match without calling me and asking me to come, inviting me to play. So we always had a very strong relationship. And so even when I'm sympathetic to the New Jewel movement in the early days, the guys knew very clearly anything against Gary personally. They kept it away from me because they knew I would not support it, because I felt that this man identify with my background, identify with my family members and the people that I care deeply about. And therefore, despite the fact of my reservation of some of his political actions, I did not allow that to interfere with how I see him as a person. So that whole history of my involvement, it came about because of my activity. So when I was asked to, and I said, I can't get involved in it. I never saw myself as a person in the politics. So at my first entry, when I ran in 1972, I did not win, but Gary was still very much the ultimate political leader at the point in time and so on. So when I returned home from university after I went out and studied and so on, and came back when I was abroad, I was involved in all levels of activities. So by the time I was asked, when the revolution fell, to come home and make a contribution, that's when I got deeply involved in the political life of the country and so on. And therefore, having done this, I can't say I regretted anything. I gave up a lot in Washington, and of course I was very much occupied in business and consultancy at a high level, working with all sorts of corporations and traveling all over the world. And I see people anxiously want to travel now. I don't miss those things because I did it long before politics. I was all over, and as a professor at Howard, I had the opportunity to meet with all sorts of academic persons all around the world and so on. So I done that, I did that, and so on. So when I came home, the contribution at the level of the grassroots, that is what turned me on, so to speak, and therefore I never regretted the decision to come home and to make the sacrifices that I made.
Doc, I love hearing your stories. I know that story about Sir Eric Matthew Gary. I know it was a special one to you.
Yeah.
But just dive into more stories, right? And more you as a person. Looking back on your journey, can you give us another defining moment in your life that has shaped you to be the person, not a politician, but the person that you are today?
Well, it's difficult to point out one thing, but I suppose I saw so many injustices in the country in the period growing up, and I remember there was a guy in Happy Hill RC school with me called Job Sylvester. And his family would be amazed to know that I remember him because he died a long, long time ago. This guy and another girl was Agatha Sandy, who was disabled. We were the top 3 students in the school at the time. And sometime I came first, sometime the other one came. 3 of us were competitive. I may have come first more often than they did, but the fact is they were good challenges for me and on the academic front at the Happy RC school. And because this guy, Joe, did not have the support system maybe at home, and because he didn't have the opportunity to go to secondary school, he ended up literally not being able to have any serious profession. And every time I saw Joe, he turned up to be a little carpenter and so on, I always looked at him and I said, I know in this guy how far, how, how strong he was academically, and the fact that he did. And it shows you the unfairness of the society that you're living in, because he should have never gone through the crack, so to speak. Because the system should identify his potential for serious academic and other forms of professional success. But the system, he fell through the crack because of the system. The unfortunate situation that most people found themselves. And Agatha Sandy never really made it to secondary school also. And these were people with strong academic background. So every time I was in a classroom and so and remember those two individuals, I will never forget that these incidents would have shaped the way I saw life in a general sense of the word. And another thing that got to me as a sportsman growing up, I realized Happy Hill is part of St. George's, and where I grew up. And I went to Presentation College, so I was become a little more acceptable. But I knew there were guys, when I went to the countryside playing, were talented cricketers, were highly capable. But they never got picked on the Grenada team, because the thing was also most isolated to St. George's and it's St. George's elite, so to speak. So these guys never got opportunities. So we lost a lot of good cricketers because of the social problems that existed and the biasness in the society that we had over the period of years. And I mean, I would never forget this. I remember a guy called Oswald Clovey, one of the best fast bowler this country has ever had. I never forget that. He went on to play Windward-Leeward cricket for the whole Windward-Leeward, and the days just before Viv Richards and others and so on. Excellent fast bowler. And I went away, so he was, when I captained Grenada, he was on the team and doing well for Grenada and the Windward Islands and so on. And I went away to study. I came back home in 1978, I believe, for a holiday period. And myself and another good friend of mine, who is now the ophthalmologist, Dr. Maguire, he won't forget that story. And so he was in Barbados doing medicine. I told him, let's go home for a few days with me and we went and have fun and drove around the country, and because I knew him well in Barbados at the time before I went away. So, what's significant is, so we took a vehicle from Peter David's father, Charles David, when he had a rental, and we were driving up to the countryside, just having fun, stopping by a shop, having a drink and chatting with people that I knew and so on. And we went just before you enter into St. Mark's, that hill going on before you enter the flat, before you go. I saw a road gang there, and all these poor people. So I slowed down, and then among the team, we saw somebody that looked like the same Oswald Clovey that played cricket for Windward-Leeward and should be in the West Indies team, but it's a poor guy. And I remember we stopped and I looked and I saw it was Clovey. How could this guy was just an ordinary road worker? He was not the foreman in the gang. And even then, to me, was below his potential as a person and the contribution he could have made to his country and his village and the community. And I stopped and said, well, wait now. Are you working here? He told me, yes, he's just a member of the gang. So I asked, who's the foreman? And the foreman identified himself. And so I said, listen, I took out a few $US and I gave the foreman and members of the gang. And I said, I want you all to allow Clovey to go to join myself and Dr. Maguire on this in the vehicle with all the dirty clothes and so on. And they were so glad because they got the US dollars. And man, they were so glad to let Clovey go. And we went all over the country and came back down and we stopped by friends. Every time we saw a friend that we knew years ago, stopped by shops and so on and drink by the time. And we went back to St. George's and drove right back up to St. Mark's in all his dirty clothes. But again, it showed you how the society was so unfair. And this is a guy that died very poor. And himself and a lot of guys like Austin George, who is now in Victoria, one of the best footballers this country has ever seen, and represented Grenada in football and cricket. I mean, when I came back home in '84, these guys had no place to stay, really. So I went to Mr. Blaze, who was then the Prime Minister, and said, look, we have guys who have sacrificed so much for this country, but because they're poor and nobody look after them, we have to do something for them. You know, and I got permission from Mr. Blaze to look for lands for them. We gave them land and we helped them to build a home. The home that Oswald is staying, Alston George is staying today, was because the initiative of myself and the NNP government at the time, with the help of our big I was not the Prime Minister then, I was just the Minister of Works. But it just showed me, Amanda, how unfair the society has been. Yeah. And today I'm talking about Oswald Clovey and Alston George. But there are a lot of these people who went through the cracks, who if the society was fairer to people in general, not based on who your father and your mother were, what part of the country you came from, and so on. If the society was fairer, we would have probably seen more development in this country, because a lot of these people's contribution were lost because of who they were, what family background they had. All these things drove me. Maybe we're talking about why I'm involved in politics. Maybe all these things have something to do with motivated me in political life going forward.
You were talking about inequities of life and so forth. So for someone making a significant life decision, what advice would you want to give them?
Well,
from your own experiences.
Well, the first thing I think you have to decide what are the things that drive you as a person. I can't help saying this, but I think I always wanted to achieve, right? And I think that individual must always want to know what are your goals, what are the things that drive you, and if that is what drives you, what are you prepared to do to make sure you achieve it? That's the key. To me, what drove me, and again, I go back to my childhood. I remember going to school as a little boy, 6 years. The parents sent you to school. My sister, Claudia, was 1 year older than I was. And she went to school 1 year before me. And that's a story I could never forget. And I went to school 1 year after. So I was what they call stage 1, because that's where you come to school first. And she was in stage 2, because you're a year ahead of me. But those days, the blackboard was the one that separated you from stage 1 and stage 2. So I just feel that she had no right to be in the class ahead of me. So every time I would duck back, and go into the class, they find me, beat me, and send me back down because I can't do the work. But they beat me. They do it over and over. And apparently the teachers met and they said, no, something wrong with this child. Because more they beat me, more they send me back down. My week would pass by and then I got back in. So they had a conference home with my mother and father. And they said, well, we don't know what to do because they be beating himself and he's still doing it. To allow me to stay in the class. They decided they couldn't handle me. But I can do the work. I remember those days you had slates where you do writing because you had to write. And also one writing period, they teach you how to write. And whenever I looked when I did an assignment and I look at my slate and they give me a C, I see my sister with a crying streak. across the street, and you know, you water from your eyes, the slate, and you clean the slate and do it over. So if I had to do it 100 times to get the A, I'm doing it. And so I remember one day a teacher of mine called Miss Ivy. I'll never forget her. She came home by my mother and she said, this child going to do something in life, because I've never seen a more determined person who is willing to do everything possible to make sure he achieves what he feels he should earn. And finally, in the end, my sister was doing better than I was, because she was ahead of me. But I started catching up gradually. By the time we reached standard 3, I would become a first in the class. So something happened. I don't know, I can't tell you what the transition was. And it was identified. I never forget one day, if you know Cajutan Hood, his father was Percival Hood, he was the math teacher in the school. And he came in that standard 3 class that we were. And the first time, in those days, you're doing little exams on, you know, long division in arithmetic, long division. And they had a series of problems on there. And the man came back in the class that day, and those days they marking the papers with red ink. And I saw this paper with 100% on it. And he proceeded to talk about the student who got that perfect score. And then he identified it was me. I never felt more proud in my life. You see that one of the, and the fact that I could remember those, it tells you how significant this event were in my life going forward. You know. So I make the point. Your question was what advice? And if you have a goal, something that you believe, it doesn't have to be academic. It might be sports. You want to be a good footballer, then practice. You may fall, but get up and do again. So whatever it is in life that you have, and if you do it so many times and you succeed, be satisfied. This is what your place is in that particular area, and you should not put yourself down. That means something is wrong with you, that you are not able. Try as hard as you can. Do not give up easily. But the time will come when you say, well, that's not for me. And I have had to do that in my life too, and give up things that I was looking forward to, because simply believe that it could not work. And that I didn't see myself as a failure because I wasn't able to achieve in that particular area. You know, and I just felt, I give another example of this is, I remember when I did my PhD, and at the time I used to be working full time, and at the same time doing a PhD, and you know, you have to go through all these materials, you have to study mathematical problems way back centuries, what people did, and so on, because you want to do a lot of research if you want to be able to. And I remember they were doing comprehensive exams at the university and I know there's some student in the class who did the exam 3 and 4 and 5 times and failing and continuing. And I said, that's good. But, you know, I said, you know, this thing, I'm giving it one try. If I don't succeed, that's it. I will be satisfied with that. That's not for me. And I did the exam the one time. This top 2 students was a Jewish girl at the university at the time, and I were 2 of us, were the 2 that passed that exam with every single subject and so on. She was tops in a few areas and I was top in a few areas, because in mathematics there are several areas. You have probability theory, you have statistical work, you have mechanics in the field of mathematics. You have so many different areas of algebra, and different aspects of the areas. Some areas she was tops and some areas I was top. But I was prepared, if I did not succeed, not to go and waste my whole life trying to do something that may not be necessarily for me. So while I say persevere, what you want, there are times you have to accept that something is not for you. and that maybe that's not your area that you should spend your entire life hoping that you can be, and you cannot.
That I think that's a beautiful advice, because even the Bible tells you that there's a time for everything, time for everything under the sun. And yes, while you do need to be determined
Yes.
and to work hard, you also need to know your limits and how far you can go.
Yes.
Right, and it doesn't mean that you're a failure.
Yes.
Because everyone has its place. Everyone has its place. So if you're a doctor, you'll be the best doctor. If you're a garbage collector, you'll be the best garbage collector there is.
Yes.
Right? Doc, you mentioned a little story about your sister and how the teachers went home to your parents. And we've seen that your parents are very supportive. But throughout your journey, who has been your pillar? Who has been that source of strength and real support for you? And how has that person influenced your life?
Yeah, my mother, who's now 102 years. I think she is the one. You see, those days, family, the mother was in the house, although they did also in the garden and so on, but they were the ones who cooked, the one who washed, and you always had to remember, and I know guys in those days, their mother was their treasure, always. They love their father, but it's a difference, because I watched my mother. The farming was my father, and farming, as I mentioned, not farming in the technical sense. Planting and hope things grow. And I watched her in the land with my father, who worked extremely hard. I had a cane mill that where we grind canes and sugar and made sugar and so on. She used to be in the mill bringing food for all the workers at the time, and also helping in the mill. And also she developed her own bakery, so she made bread for us to go off and sell. So I used to have to go to Brazan with a basket of bread early in the morning to sell. And my sister stayed in Happy Hill because the girl stayed closer to home, and I was brought to Brazan. So she baked. She washed all our clothes. She was in the garden. She was in the cane mill, and she cooked for everybody. How could you forget somebody like this? And look at her today. Right? I see a woman baking with a whole wheat and this big tray, kneading this flour over and over, and going in the oven with a mud oven that we had at the time, right? And then she moved from there. If you go from hot to cold, or you could get cold, well, she should have got a lot of cold. Because from that she moved to washing all our clothes. In those days, I went to secondary school. I went to Presentation College. Those are white pants and white shirt. So you can imagine, now you have 2 white pants, 2 white shirts, because that's what we could afford. So she has to be washing almost every day, because boys, I'm going to go and play and dirty white. and that pants will last. Next day she has to wash again. And I think college changed after a time, and I noticed they changed their clothes from this white pants and white shirt. It was really evil for those mothers and fathers. We boys never had a problem because we didn't have to do anything, and she had no maid. So I just may say to say to you that we could never forget the mothers who had to go through this. So to see that we went to school and that we were able to achieve what our goals were academically and others, without their support, we would never have made it. I would not be sitting here with you.
Well, Doc, we're about to wrap up. That was a beautiful, beautiful statement that you made. But do you think that your mother, as you mentioned her, right? Do you think that your mother has impacted the way you brought in so many females into the parliament and stuff with you, into your party, per se?
It could be. I can't say it necessarily directly. So I just knew that you grew up in a society that you felt there was so much people that got lost in the system, and a lot of females, because there was bias against girls. That's a fact. There are some parents who said they're not spending their money on girl children because they won't get boyfriend and get pregnant. So the boys were the ones giving all the push. because they didn't seem to understand that the unfairness of the statement that they were making. I don't think they love their daughters less. It's just that it's a system you grew up in. I know to some extent my father was somebody who felt that way too, and my mother is the one who insisted, no, every one of them must go to secondary school. But for his one part, because we're not given the level of support in terms of the educational advance. But my mother insisted that all of us should get that opportunity and so on. So I think I knew my own life growing up. And then when I was teaching in secondary school here, I taught here at Presentation College, and I went to Shaper, and I met a number of girls who were extremely good in mathematics. And I saw the talent, and some of them didn't believe in themselves because they were told that girls are not good in science.
Yeah, the culture.
Nonsense. But I saw the talent of so many young girls whose parents were extremely poor, who never would have had a chance had it not been for the St. John's Secondary School opening in St. John's up there to give a lot of these people who never had a chance to go to secondary school, an opportunity to be an educator. So going forward, I remember Timothy Antwine, his mother, was one of those persons who never got a chance to go to secondary school. And when I went to Shaper, she was in the class, the Form 5 class, because they were almost people of my age group, slightly younger than I am, or some cases, some of them were older than I was. But they succeeded because they were capable, but the system them was so unfair to poor people, children, that people like them never had an opportunity to go to secondary school. And Ursula Antwine, Timmy's mother, turned out to be one of the best teachers this country has seen over the years. She passed away, unfortunately, not long ago. But she gave us a lot of excellent daughters and sons who were making tremendous contribution to this country. So the society really was a problem. So I maybe all this kind of made me realize the necessity that it is not about male or female, it's about your ability and, of course, your commitment to sacrifice and do what you have to do for yourself. And therefore, I don't see the difference between a man and a woman as far as opportunities are concerned going forward.
And that I can definitely appreciate.
Okay.
But Doc, your mother made 102. How much you think you're going to clock?
Men never live as long as women, you know that. We don't behave as good as women, and you know that. You know that's why I think you're laughing at me in that respect. My mom, she's special. She still goes out on mornings. I'm sure she did that this morning and take a little walk. And no one can stop her. As long as the rain is not falling. She wants to insist on going out, and she fights with us all the time for making sure that we go to church. She's insisting on that. I have a brother now that hardly wants to go to church, and she's insisting every day that he must go. So even when I don't feel like going, she gonna call and say, "Are you coming to church?" I can't say no, So, but she's special, and I suppose a lot of people are maybe not as fortunate to have a mom who's been there so long over the years, who have been able to nurture you and support you and guide you and provide the kind of support that was necessary in your achievement, the things that you achieved in your own life.
Well, I must say the Mitchell family is indeed blessed to have a stalwart as mommy.
Yes.
But Dr. Mitchell, that's all the time we have for today. Guys, thank you for viewing, and just like, share, and subscribe to our channel.